Good morning, everybody. Yes, I know I'm early this morning. Um, I'm in London. I'm due to deliver some training here in Mayfair to a large estate agency. So, unfortunately, I've had to jump on early today. So, let's get into the news headlines as quickly as possible. Let's start here with the Metro. I was quite interested in this. This is less of a news piece and more of an information piece. So this is the salary you need to buy a house in every London borough, and it's bleak. Interesting. So it starts off with some historic facts, which I do like. I do like a historic fact. Once upon a time, London was a city where buying a home felt possible, even for the average worker. In 1986, the typical house price in the Big Smoke was £55,000. And as Peter Apps writes in his book, which is called Homesick, it's normal for people on a fairly average income, like builders and nurses, to be able to buy a home. Fast forward to 2026, and homes in the capital are now almost 660,000. That's a 30.1% increase. I mean, looking at these, it's the highest percentage increase since 1971, which in itself is scary. And it's safe to say that anybody trying to get on the housing ladder in London is kind of a bit short, really. So data from Zoopla, which was shared exclusively for the Metro for this article, reveals just how much you need to earn. So we're going to start with the very bougie area of Chelsea, which of course is the priciest. And the gross annual salary is just shy of 200,000. The average house price is just shy of 1.1 million. That's, that's a lot of money. I'm not living there anytime soon. Naturally, this towers over the average salary, which is just over 37,500. That's from the Office of National Statistics, and that was their last set of data. Things aren't much better in Westminster. The average salary needs to be 166,000, and your average house price is 936,000. And then as we sort of move through, London streets and all that, as we move through to the different boroughs, you've got Barking and Dagenham. That requires earnings of just under 60,000, with the average house price 335,000. I think this really goes to show, first of all, that yes, house prices are increasing. I think we know that. Sometimes they stagnate, sometimes they dip a little bit. But ultimately, the income for people isn't chasing those property prices. So yes, absolutely. I know for a fact that my parents bought their first property, and I think it was about 10 grand. But when they eventually sold that property, it went for nearly 800,000. So, that's not even, my dad's wages certainly didn't increase at the same rate as that property. So I just thought that was a really interesting article in the Metro, and I do love figures. I do love some stats. You know how much I love the stats. So now let's move on to LandlordZone. So I thought this particular article was quite interesting. It's an opinion piece from Phil Turtle, who is one of the owners of Landlord Licensing and Defence. They specialise in HMO licensing, if you get caught by the council, or things like that. But I was quite interested in his opinion piece here in LandlordZone. A licensing expert warns that a swathe of legislation changes in 2026 will lead to a race to the bottom for both landlords and tenants. Interesting. So Phil goes on to say that it's basically the accidental and small landlords. I don't like the word accidental landlord. There's no such thing as an accidental landlord. You didn't drunkenly purchase your property on Amazon and wake up in the morning and go, oh crap, I'm a landlord. You knew it was coming. Whether it was, what it was unplanned, but it certainly wasn't accidental. Anyway, that's just me. So small landlords are inevitably be the first to sell up and worsening the supply levels. Are they though? Because when I'm speaking to small landlords, yes, they're wanting to sell, but they're wanting to sell with a tenant in situ. That seems to be the new buzz. And if you've got a great tenant, why would you want to evict them just for a new investor to buy that property and probably put the same tenant back in? It makes no sense. I would just sell with the tenant in situ. So he He actually goes on to say what is already happening inevitably is that older style landlords who really cared about their tenants and providing decent homes for all will leave. New money motivated landlords will replace them, all out of focus and picking up properties cheap from distressed existing landlords and maximising profits. He goes on to say there will be new penalties in place for landlords, which actually came in on the 27th of December last year, with fines up to as much as 40,000 for breaches. Now, you've got to breach several times to get to that, but, you know. And then there's an additional comment here from Paul Champlina, who says self-managing landlords are more vulnerable. More landlords will need to hire an agent, and then he goes on to add that it'll just simply eat away at profits, and for the smaller landlord it just won't be financially viable anymore. And I think Paul's got a point there, to be honest with you. I mean, I think this is going to be the age where the agent needs to come into their own. Self-managing landlords are either going to need to get their shit together, know the legislation inside out. I mean, I'm still working with landlords who haven't even protected deposits. They didn't think they had to. They didn't know they had to. That's been law since 2007. You know, I don't like the excuse, oh, well, I've just got one property, I didn't know. You're running a business, whether you like it or not. Get your stuff together. Anyway, moving on. Now we're going on to the Negotiator. So the Negotiator's article today, which caught my eye, was Guarantor-backed tenancies surge ahead of the Renters' Rights Act. So this, again, is a piece about the increase in how landlords and letting agents are trying to safeguard themselves against the new regulations. So, excuse me while this bit sticks in my throat. Generation Rent found that more than 40% of new contracts required a guarantor this year, and there's also an increase in demand for multiple rents up front. Now, obviously, we know under the Renters' Rights Act, we can't ask for more than 1 month's rent up front, but it kind of makes sense. If you can still do it now, get as much money in the bank as you can from a tenant, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a safety net. I get that. But of course, then you limit the pool of tenants available because a lot of tenants don't have 6 months rent up front. The article goes on to say, the number of tenants requiring a guarantor have jumped this year, according to, like I say, the activist group Generation Rent. Now, bearing in mind, they're a little bit like Shelter, and they like the figures to answer the question they already had, rather than proving facts. More than 40% of renters quizzed by the group said they needed a family member or friend to act as a guarantor when they signed up for a new property this year. This was up 33% for tenants who started a tenancy between 1 and 3 years ago, and a 26% for more than 5 years ago. But I think society has changed as well. I mean, if you think, 5 years ago, we were sort of 2020, so we were still in lockdown, really. And people's lives changed. We work from home now. That was pretty much unheard of, really. It's the norm now. So people's lives have changed, salary expectations have changed. So I can see why that element has changed somewhat. Then it goes on to say there has also been an increase in renters being asked for multiple months' rent up front, from between 19% from 1 to 3 years ago to 23% from a year ago. Generation Rent polled 711 private renters. Well, bearing in mind there's currently 4.6 million households in the private rented sector, which equate to around 11 million tenants. 711 don't really sit. It's not hard. It's hardly 40% of the market, is it? Anyway, I digress. The picture is still dire, but in some respects things are easing, with fewer renters being asked to move out. That's true. I think we're seeing less and less tenants being asked to move out. Landlords, I think, are using Section 21 now with troublesome tenants, not problem tenants, troublesome. And rather than have to deal with that troublesome under the new legislation, they're just getting shot now and hoping they're going to get a better tenant later down the line. Bags in, you'd like to ask a question? Yeah, please type your question in, and if I can see it pop up on the screen, I will answer it. If not, I'll scroll through and answer your question at the end. So then I'm going to move on to I've lost connection. I hate this place. I've lost connection. Anyway, I was going to move on to an article in Landlord today, which obviously I can't do without an internet connection, which is a pain in the arse. So, I mean, realistically, when we're looking at these, and you know, certainly looking at those other articles, I think guarantors are going to be the common norm. I think guarantor companies are going to come into their own. People like Housing Hand, people like Guarantor UK. I think absolutely they're going to be moving the industry in a different direction now. If anyone's got a question, now I've lost internet connection on the laptop and can't read another bloody article that I've pulled up ready for you all, please do ask questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them while I'm here. If not, I'll just have to try and find some other articles. No, it's not going to work. Let me see if I can get some internet. Hang on. Stay with me, people. Stay with me. Oh, don't you love London? Don't you love London? The wonders of modern technology. You'd think in the middle of bloody London, you'd have an internet connection, wouldn't you? No. Computer says no. My hands are freezing. I'm actually not that cold, it's just my hands are cold. Okay, your question. How will agreements with the council work under the Renters' Rights Act as they can't guarantee vacant possession? That's a really good question, and I think it depends realistically what type of contract you've got in place. If it's what I would class as a simple rent to rent, so the council are renting the property from you for, let's say, 5 years at a guaranteed rent, and then they are renting the property on to somebody else, maybe for temporary accommodation, then it's outside of the Renters' Rights Act, because ultimately your tenancy directly with the council is a commercial agreement. Rent to rent is a commercial agreement. It comes under the Landlord and Tenant Act of 1954. It doesn't touch the Housing Act in any way, shape or form. Now, there are new grounds under Section 8 that are specifically for social housing providers. So that would include the council, that would include housing associations that are currently using the property. So they're what we'd call the means tenant. So they're the tenant in the middle. So they will now have new grounds. I think it's 5D, E and F, but don't quote me on that. I think those are the new grounds that have come in, that basically if the superior landlord, which is you, wants your property back, you would give them notice, and then they would be able to use these new ground 5s on the occupants to be able to regain the possession. Obviously, they'll have to go through the court process if the tenant doesn't vacate, but 9 times out of 10, when the councils are using the properties like this, they don't have the tenants on assured tenancies. They have those tenancies on licences, because under Section 7 of the Housing Act 2004, and also the Homeless Reduction Act, the councils are putting those people in accommodation temporarily. So the temporary element means they'll be on licences, so much easier to use. So it's unlikely they'll need the Section 8 route, but it is there if they do need the Section 8 route. But ultimately, they're usually on licences, so it's just a notice to quit, usually 14 days notice, and you get your property back. But it would depend, obviously, the contract that the council have with the occupants, if that makes sense. Anybody got any other questions? Now I've completely lost the internet altogether in the middle of London. God help us. If not, I'll call it a day, and I'll see you again at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So another question, Lou Penny. So rent to rent with council is a better option. Now, that's a bit like, what's better, cream or milk? I think it depends on your situation, and I think ultimately it depends on the terms and conditions of the contract. Read the small print. That's the big one for me. Rent to rent options with the councils can work, but that's if the council have got their shit together. 9 times out of 10, the councils aren't really that interested about who they're putting in a property. They're literally moving paper around the desk, solving a problem and trying to hit their targets. So sometimes you have to be a little bit understanding of who's going to be in your property. It might upset the neighbours. They may not be the most social of human beings. I think it can work. I mean, I used to do lease options, which is rent to rent, with Dacorum Borough Council, which is sort of Hemel Hempstead area, and that worked really well. But we made sure that the contracts were watertight and we heavily managed the properties, so we were aware of anything going on in those properties. So the other thing you've got to make sure you've got is, if you've got a mortgage on the property, do they allow that type of let? A lot of them don't. You have to get permission or a different product. And then if it's a lease, for example, if it's leasehold and there's freehold, then obviously you've got those issues to deal with, and just make sure you've got the right insurance as well. Councils with its shit together. Yeah, I know. There's not a lot of councils that have got their shit together, but there might be some out there. You never know your luck. Which section is it, Julie? Which you said the council genuinely use licenses. So it's basically, it's the Housing Act of 2004, and it's Part 7, and that's the section that basically deals with homelessness, to be fair. That's the section. Then you've got the Homeless Reduction Act as well, that allows them to put them onto licenses rather than tenancy agreements. Wilson James, what type of tenancy agreement is easy to evict a tenant without going to court? Now, it isn't about what piece of paper you give them, it's about their legal setup. So the easiest thing to have is a lodger agreement, and so you would need to live in the property and you have a lodger, because basically all you'd need to do is give them reasonable notice, which could be 7 days, it could be 14 days, and then if they don't leave, you just peacefully change the locks, pack their stuff up, and you're done and dusted. If you are genuinely renting out a property and that person has exclusive possession, so what that means is they're renting the property, whether that's a room in a shared HMO where the landlord doesn't live, or whether that is, you know, a studio flat or one-bedroom flat or a house. If the landlord is not allowed to walk into that front door willy-nilly, then you have an assured tenancy. And there's not a lot you can do. You would have to go through the formal court process, currently Section 21, and in the future, Section 8. The only other way you can get around it is by providing serviced accommodation. So that would be, you are literally going in and providing a change of linen service. You are going in and providing a cleaning service. No, that's not flinging cleaner into the communal areas once a week and going, that's serviced. No, you need to be providing meals and things like that. So it's quite difficult to get in a situation where you'll easily be able to evict a tenant. Any more questions? Oh, runny nose. It's all gone very quiet over there. Just me. No problem, Wilson, you're welcome. Okay, so as the internet has failed me today, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I will see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll go through the news properly with an internet connection. Thanks very much, guys. Have a wonderful day.